The Fort Erie Podcast with Brent Jones. Brent Jones starts now.
Hey, that is me. I'm Brent Jones. Welcome to episode 68. I've got an email here from a listener. I'm going to share it with you here in just a moment. I don't normally do this kind of thing. If you have feedback on the show or you got something you want to share with me, always happy to hear from you, dear listener, but I'd recommend calling the Byrd Box. Just call 289-599-2973. Leave a message there and I'll play it right here on the Fort Erie podcast. Happy to respond to you. But in this case, since it was such a nice email, I thought, what the heck? Let's read part of it on the show. So I copied and pasted it into one of those robot AI thingies that does like text to speech to basically read it out loud for me. So here we go.
Oh, Brent. First, I would like to thank you for your wonderful podcast. I thoroughly enjoy listening to you. It makes my excruciating 2-hour commute home from downtown Toronto a little more tolerable.
Oh, wow.
I have listened to every episode, some of them several times over.
You've listened to some of these episodes more than once? Oh my God. I'm over here worried that people don't stick around and actually listen to the entire episode. And here's this listener going through every episode more than once. I find that incredible. You're not sick of me, sir, but thank you. That's extremely kind. Extremely kind. I really do appreciate you listening. And then the email continues with some questions. I'll press play.
My question to you, Brent. What prompted you to make the transition from the GTA to Ridgeway? Perhaps this is something you could cover in one of your podcasts. I am curious as to why you and your wife decided on Ridgeway, and were you involved in the real estate profession prior to moving to Fort Erie?
I actually think I've answered these questions in previous podcast episodes. I'm not sure. I might be wrong. I'll answer them again. Just to clarify, we didn't actually move to Ridgeway back in 2014. My wife and I bought our first home on Jarvis Street in the North End, Bridgeburg. That's where we lived for 6 years. When we did relocate to Ridgeway, that was 3 years ago, there wasn't any specific reason for it. I mean, we wanted more space, a finished basement, a garage, a number of things specific to our home. We definitely wanted to remain in the town of Fort Erie. We actually looked at several different properties all over town before buying in Ridgeway. We looked at homes in Crystal Beach. We looked at some in Stevensville and so forth. And the house that we liked the best just happened to be in Ridgeway. So that's when we ended up purchasing. As far as why we moved to the town of Fort Erie in the first place 9 years ago, there's a few reasons. I mean, first and foremost, housing prices. It's funny to think back like 9 years ago, because most of us go, man, like I would love to have 2014 housing prices back. But at the time for us, we lived in North York, and buying a home in the Toronto area just seemed completely out of reach for us. We were newly married. We also had 2 active dogs, still have those dogs, Gibson and Sterling. So it was the 2 of us, our 2 dogs. We had no yard. We were living in a small 1-bedroom apartment in North York, probably less than 600 square feet. We wanted to buy a home of our own, and we started looking elsewhere outside of the GTA where it might be more affordable. We settled on Niagara region first, the region as a whole, because we love the area. The people are laid back. There's always lots going on, plenty of stuff to do. We didn't know a whole ton at the time about the town of Fort Erie, but coming from, very densely packed urban environment, we both knew we were small town people at heart, which attracted us to this area. And as kind of a secondary benefit, I suppose, living in Fort Erie meant being on the border, being close to the border. My wife is American. She was born in Miami. She was raised in Atlanta. And with Buffalo Airport being so close, it made it very easy for us to go visit her family on sort of short notice, made it easier for them to come visit us. To your other question, no, I was not a realtor prior to moving to this town. In fact, it was one of the motivators that got me into real estate about 5 years ago. It was that when we bought our first home on Jarvis, I was not super impressed with the agent who represented us. I remember thinking at the time, like, I could probably do better. And hopefully, I think I have so far. Anyway, let's get into today's episode. Hopefully that answers your question, sir. But Lisa Kelleher is going to be joining me today. She's the owner and operator of Crescent Gardens Florist on Ridge Road. My interview with Lisa will be split into 2 parts, where there was kind of a natural pause in our conversation. First, we'll discuss Crescent Gardens itself, the new location in downtown Ridgeway. The second half of our chat coming up later in today's episode, we'll get into more of what Crescent Gardens offers, including some of their environmentally sustainable floral options. We're going to do some ranting and raving on today's episode. We're going to go through some Fort Erie questions and answers. But for right now, let's see what kind of messages you guys have left for me on the Byrd Box.
It's Fort Erie's answering machine, the Byrd Box.
Welcome to the Byrd Box. If you're new to the Fort Erie podcast, the Byrd Box is the answering machine I have set up for this show. You can call 24 hours a day, squawk about anything you like. And I call it the Byrd Box because the last four digits spell BYRD. You can reach the Byrd Box at 289-599-BYRD, and then I'll play the messages you leave right here on the Fort Erie podcast. Now, regular listeners of this show will already know that people call the Byrd Box for all kinds of reasons, maybe to promote a local musician or to mention an upcoming community event or tell a joke or share their favorite pizza place in town, ask a question. I mean, whatever. You can call for any reason you want. But for this episode, all I've got for you today, just a collection of messages here from folks around town complaining about traffic. They're all traffic complaints, all of them. And I'm guessing a lot of these complaints are cropping up because kids are back in school now. So let's start with this one right here.
I know in a previous podcast you mentioned you could not take credit for having Burley Road resurfaced, but I think you deserve at least some recognition. Now I'd like you to work your magic one more time and have speed bumps installed along Burley from Dominion to Thunder Bay. It is just a drag strip. Cars barrel along that stretch at 80 kilometers an hour or more, and it's just dangerous for pedestrians, cyclists, anybody walking their dog. Anyway, thanks, Brent. Love the podcast. Take care.
Well, thanks. I mean, I'm glad you enjoy the show, sir, but I don't think I ever worked any magic. What this caller is referencing at the start of his message, this happened several episodes ago, episode 57 or 58 maybe. I asked listeners to call in and report what they felt was the worst road around the town of Fort Erie, the street that was in most desperate need of repair. And a few people called in and reported that same stretch of road, which is Burley between Dominion and Thunder Bay. It was awful. And it that was my opinion as well. Worst road in Fort Erie, for sure. So what I did is I called the town right here on the Fort Erie podcast. I left a message about it, just said, hey, I've got some listeners who are concerned about this stretch of road. And within days, the town was tearing up Burley Road to redo it. Now, and I've said then, and I maintain to this day, I cannot take credit for that happening, guys. Yes, I called the town. But, and I'd love to take credit for it, but I'm pretty sure for a project like that, there must have already been funds and, resources earmarked for that. The timing was just coincidental. But even if I could take credit for that happening, sir, now you're asking me to get you some speed bumps? I mean, that is a tall order. I don't even know, are there any roads in Fort Erie that even have speed bumps? I mean, I can't think of one. Now, look, I don't disagree with what this caller is saying, by the way. That stretch of Burley Road, Dominion through Thunder Bay, it is a side street, but it gets used like a main artery to get down to all of that new development, down on the Crystal Beach border, the Thunder Bay area. There's a lot of traffic going through there, and it's a narrow street. And, it is nicely paved now, but there's still no sidewalks. So people are out on the road riding bikes or walking dogs, or there's kids playing. So I certainly would not be opposed to speed bumps being added to that area. I just think, I think it might be a bit of a tall order, even if it is a good idea. I'm going to give this one some thought. But anyway, let's move on to another message. This one here is about electric scooters.
Yeah, hi there. As I drive around town, I'm seeing an inordinate number of these three-wheeled vehicles driven by handicapped and elderly people. But lately, I'm seeing them driving in live lanes of traffic. And just last week, while turning left at Crescent and Garrison, there was an elderly man in a three-wheeled vehicle in front of me, turning left and not wearing a helmet. And I've seen 4 today. One was on a sidewalk, which I guess is okay, but 3 in live lanes. They should be wearing helmets. My son is a Durham regional policeman, and he tells me it is law up there that any vehicle, 2-wheel or 3-wheel, that uses live lanes of traffic must have a helmet. And I'm wondering if you can find out, because I know what's going to happen. Somebody's going to get killed, and then there's going to be a big thing about it. So I'm wondering if you can find out what the heck's going on. Thanks.
Okay, so now we have 2 callers calling in, asking me to get things done. Like, I don't think this has ever happened before. Nobody's ever called and asked me to do something. And if I'm being really honest, I'm not sure how to respond. Like, I'm kind of flattered, but at the same time, like, if scooter riders not wearing helmets is that big of a concern to you, sir, have you tried reaching out to Niagara Regional Police or your town councilor, the mayor's office, somebody elected who might actually be able to do something for you? Like, dude, I'm a podcaster. I don't do investigative journalism. I just try on the show to highlight what's good in our town. But anyway, to the heart of the message here, I'm confused. Like, are there not laws already on the books that require helmet use in live traffic? I actually don't know the answer to that question. If you, dear listener, do know the answer, call the Byrd Box and let me know, 289-599-2973. Because I think the real issue with helmet laws is now and has always been enforcement. It's a great idea to have them on the books for sure, but as this caller says, in one outing, he saw 4 scooters, 3 of them were in live traffic, and none of them were wearing helmets. Now imagine if it was somebody's responsibility to go around and ticket these people all day, every day, and not to mention that person would be ticketing primarily, as this caller says, disabled and elderly people who aren't exactly known for having excess cash, to pay fines with. So I'm not saying it's not a good reason to implement helmet laws. I'm just saying that enforcement of those laws and compliance from the public are totally separate matters. Let's play one more message here. I'm sure this caller is going to give me some work to do too. Here, have a listen.
Every car on Highway 3 Garrison between 6:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning is speeding. The cops do nothing about it. The only way anybody's going to wake up at regional or town council is if someone they love and care about ends up in a car crash because of a bad driver.
Yeah, Garrison Road, Highway 3. I just call it Garrison Speedway. It's not everybody, of course. Not this guy says every car. It's not every car. Not everybody is speeding. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that speeding is a bit of a problem there, especially where it turns 80. And look, I've been known, I don't want to be a hypocrite, I'll be honest, I've been known to go 10 over the limit before, that part where it turns 80, but I can be going 10 over and I'll still have vehicles like racing past me. I find the speeding especially crazy when you start getting into the school zones on Garrison. You go by the school there, Garrison Road Public School, there's that flashing light that goes on at certain times of day that reduces the speed limit from 60 to 40, and I will dutifully slow down to 40 or at least very close to 40. And I will still have vehicles flying past me, like people riding my bumper. And they're in a school zone. There's kids around. I'll never understand that. Like, what is your hurry? Where are you going? I mean, you're in the town of Fort Erie. It's not like you're contending with traffic in the first place. There's only a handful of stoplights across this entire town. You can get anywhere you need to be in under 10 minutes. Just slow down, man. It's not worth hitting somebody. It's not worth ruining somebody else's life because you're 5 minutes behind. Anyway, if you want to leave your own traffic complaint or a message on any other subject, call the Byrd Box. I'll play your messages in an upcoming episode.
Have something you want to squawk about? Let the whole town know what's on your mind. Call the Byrd Box at 289-599-2973. That's 289-599-BYRD.
All right, joining me on the phone right now, I've got Lisa Kelleher from Crescent Gardens Florist. Lisa, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you, Brent, for asking, and thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad you joined me. I'm excited to talk with you. I mentioned before I hit the record button that I have questions specifically about your business, but I also just have questions about the floral business in general. So let's maybe start with an easy one. I'm curious about your new location because you're now on Ridge Road. You used to be on Garrison Road. Why the move?
Well, yes, I'm very excited to be located in Ridgeway at 266 Ridge Road North. It's a wonderful business community of like-minded, primarily women business owners on Ridge Road these days. Mm-hmm. Shout out to the few men as well. But yeah, it's a wonderful business community. I'm in a great location, and I couldn't ask for anything more than to be located right next to the market because we're all part of the agriculture and growing community. So it's very nice in that respect. After 90 years in the location on Garrison Road, I did make the difficult decision to close that location and open permanently in Ridgeway. There were a lot of mitigating factors, but most of all, just basically the landlord was going in a different direction with the building, and so we decided that it would be best if we had a permanent location in Ridgeway.
And it sounds like with being located right next to the farmers market, like right in sort of the downtown area, I'm guessing you get more foot traffic now than you might have on Garrison Road. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. Yes, absolutely. The market does bring a lot of people in on the Saturday, but also during the week, it's a tight commercial space, so people walk the length of the downtown core. So we do get a lot of passing trade because of that. So it's definitely beneficial, our location, for passing trade.
Well, I would think, yeah. And then moving, I mean, Crescent Gardens, I'm sure was a nod to Crescent Park being in that area. Was there ever any thought to changing it to, Ridge Gardens Florist, changing the name at all, or no?
Well, originally I actually bought the Tulip Tree Floral in Ridgeway, but when I purchased that business, I was asked by the previous owner to change the name. And so I did run a flower shop in my location in Ridgeway for a couple of years called the Mythical Meadow.
Right.
And then when I bought Crescent Gardens, I decided to phase out the name of the Mythical Meadow name because it just didn't carry as much weight or history. And Crescent Gardens is just so well known that I couldn't deny that heritage. So I decided to phase out Mythical Meadow and keep the Crescent Gardens brand.
And Crescent Gardens, I mean, that's a brand that goes back to, it's 1932, isn't it?
I believe it's 1932 that it was first established, and it was in the same family for 3 generations, and with no 4th generation to take over the business, it was my great fortune to have been asked to purchase the business, and so now here we stand.
Well, how long ago was that? How long have you owned Crescent Gardens Florist?
Since December of 2020.
Okay, so that recently.
Almost 3 years.
Yeah, wow.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't realize it was that recent. How, may I ask how that happened?
Well, I think that with there not being a 4th generation and Wayne, the previous owner, entering his golden years, he just decided that it was a good time with COVID had hit. And so I think he just decided it was a good time for him to step out. And I was a florist at Tulip Tree for years. And then with having bought it and running it as my own shop, I think he just had the confidence that I would be able to take over the mantle of the larger brand and hopefully do a good job for him. So I was just the right place at the right time.
Got it. So you've been involved then in the floral business for quite some time.
I've been a florist for 35 years, yes, and my floral career has spanned continents. I've worked in flower shops all across Canada and also in Europe.
Wow. Okay. So that's an interesting resume. How does somebody get into, how does somebody become a florist? I mean, it's always been interesting to me for 2 reasons. One is that, there's a certain skill set I think that goes along with being a florist that not everybody has. But the other thing is that I feel like there's a temperament because I've never met a florist I didn't like. It seems like, I don't know, you guys all just have this very warm personality to you that I really enjoy. So how did you personally, find your way to becoming a florist?
Well, you're right. And you're correct in the assumption that it is a very highly specialized skill. And it actually takes years to develop because there are so many facets to the floral industry. Years and years ago, when I first started, it was basically a hands-on education. You were lucky enough to get a job in a flower shop and just learned on the job. Nowadays, there are courses out there that you can take, certificate courses that you can take. Through Niagara College has one, and there are also independent, privately owned organizations that also offer certification. And you can go, anyone can go that route. It's certainly very helpful in learning, the basics of the mechanics and things like that. But there'll be nothing to compare to the hands-on experience of actually working in a shop. And so most of the time, with the exception of the graduates out there of those programs, but most of the time it's people that don't have any experience that are hired at flower shops. And just learn on the job. There's a huge steep learning curve on learning the varieties and the names and the colors and the seasons, but then also the appropriateness for different events and occasions and what's best for what reason. And the seasons change, and with it, the holidays come and go, and every single facet of the industry kind of has its own special uniqueness to it that it takes a long time to develop an awareness of all of that. So it's about a 5-year program really to be totally comfortable in the floral industry.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned some of those cultural factors, like different events, holidays, different occasions, you also mentioned, being a florist in Europe. So I assume geographically being in different areas, it's like almost like a different skill set to learn.
Well, there's a lot of similarities across the industry, but then there are subtle differences. And a lot of that is reflected in the availability of the flowers, in that wherever you are, the more localized agricultural industry will provide different types of flowers in volume. Let's put it that way. So although we can get most types of flowers that are available across the industry, sometimes availability is limited depending on the season. And that's different wherever you are in the world. So different seasons, different availability of flowers. So, if you're down further south in the tropics, obviously tropical flowers will be more readily available all year long. Whereas up here, that's a specialty item that we would have to pre-order.
Well, where do your flowers come from? Because I'm always curious when I walk into your store and I see all these beautiful arrangements. I'm very familiar with passing farms that are growing, say, corn or other crops, but I've never passed a flower farm. So I've always wondered where do you get these beautiful flowers? Like how do they get delivered to your store?
Well, it's quite a massive infrastructure, massive global infrastructure. And it's a cold chain that delivers flowers all over the world. And so many of the flowers that I get at my flower shop have flown in from any of the four corners of the world. We do get a lot of flowers from Central America, but also from the United States. California and Florida have large growing operations. And as well, we do have flower growing operations across Canada. British Columbia has a big agricultural industry out there for growing flowers. And in Ontario, we do have, to a smaller extent, we do have a lot of growers in Ontario as well. As to why you don't really see a lot of flower farms on your drive. Now, there are a few flower farms in the Niagara region that are just wonderful, beautiful, beautiful operations. And I'm reaching out to them right now to say, please give me a call. I would love to do business with you if I haven't heard of you or if I'm not already doing business with you. It's very important to me that we do start to support that more local economy and try to create an economy that's keeping the money and the resources within our own communities. And so although currently I get the bulk of my flowers from a wholesaler or several wholesalers in the Toronto and in the Niagara region, a lot of the flowers are imported. And so my goal is to try to create more of a local network to try to use those more local products. Now, as you probably realize, we have a limited growing season here.
Yes.
Throw a greenhouse or two into the mix, you can extend it on either side a little bit, but there's still a natural rhythm to a lot of the growth patterns of certain flowers, and just you can't force them in the winter, even in ideal greenhouse conditions.
Well, I like your focus on local, and anybody who's listened to the Fort Erie podcast for any period of time knows that I'm all about boosting local, right? Whatever we can keep locally makes sense, but I'd have to think that with so much of the product being imported from elsewhere, there's got to be, is there ever any flack about like environmental impact, about what the future of flowers is going to look like with, as we become sort of more environmentally conscious about importing these types of things?
Well, to be honest, Brent, I'm surprised that there hasn't been a huge uproar about it, because I'm right in the middle of the floral industry. Like I am in the thick of it. And it's sometimes I have days where I'm conflicted about this industry that I just love and have been a part of for over 30 years now, because the carbon footprint is horrendous. And I've never been to a foreign farm, but I can imagine there are certain circumstances where the working conditions aren't ideal for the staff.
Sure.
And on top of that, there are a lot of chemicals used in the flower industry. And so there's kind of, there are many different issues with the global floral industry, but there's such an opportunity for those local growers to kind of hitchhike onto that platform that's already existing, onto that infrastructure that already exists. It's a $1 trillion, there's billions and billions and billions of dollars trading in the floral industry every year. And I believe that the opportunity is there for those local growers to hop on board.
Fort Erie questions and answers based on the Facebook group by the same name.
The second half of my chat will be coming up with Lisa shortly, but first let's jump into some Fort Erie questions and answers. This is the part of the show where I go through the Facebook group by the same name and pick out any questions and answers that I thought were especially interesting or helpful. Like this first one from Debbie. She says, I know it's been asked before, but for the life of me, I can't find any posts about where in Fort Erie there were clothing drop-off containers. There were a couple of different responses here. A lot of people mentioned that there's a donation bin in the Walmart parking lot, sort of closer to the Scotiabank. And then a lot of people mentioned the Legion, both in Fort Erie and Ridgeway, have donation bins. And I could say that, yes, I've donated clothes through the bin at the Legion in Fort Erie several times before. And if I turn my head ever so slightly and look out my office window, I'm actually staring right at the Fort Erie Legion. And yes, there is a donation bin in the parking lot at the time I'm recording this podcast. So yes, that might be your best bet, Debbie. Nancy says, hi all, looking for a place to get a birthday cake done with Elmo on it. I'm looking for it to be done for tomorrow around noon. Oh my God, talk about short notice. She says it's for my grandson's second birthday. It has to be local. And she adds in, she didn't have to say this. She says, my son has been very busy and waited too long. So grandma here is, throwing shade at her son because he waited too long to get a cake for her grandson. That's kind of funny. Now, getting a cake done tomorrow around noon, I mean, expectations wise, I don't know. I think that's a tall ask for a custom cake, but a lot of people did mention to try artistic sweets. One person mentioned Sobeys might be able to turn around a cake that fast, but I don't know how good their Elmo is at Sobeys. Who knows? Cravings by Jane wasn't mentioned in the comments, but I'll throw it in there as a suggestion. She makes custom cakes, so it could be worth at least a phone call. Cravings by Jane is in Crystal Beach, of course. Nikki says, is there a consignment store in Fort Erie? The correct answer, which came up a bunch of times in the comments, was Wild Daisy's Consignment, which is right next door to 335 on the Ridge, downtown Ridgeway. And then this last question is wild. All right, so Catherine says, hello, everyone. Yesterday, my son forgot his bike on the street and somebody took it around Highland Avenue. It is a green bicycle for a 6-year-old boy. If you have any information, please let me know. Before I even get into the responses on this one, let me just say, if you are an adult and you go around stealing kids' bikes, you are a piece of human garbage. Fight me. I mean, come on. This is ridiculous. I understand that times are hard for a lot of people, but when you go and steal a 6-year-old kid's bike, you must be out your mind, man. That is crazy. What an awful thing to do to a kid. But hey, it never ceases to amaze me, the generosity, the kindness around our town. A user named Mindy comments, I'd like to buy your son a new bike. I'm sorry this happened. You talk about generosity in our small town, eh? And then another user, Joni, commented, yeah, I'll pitch in. And I remember a similar thing happened a few years ago in Crystal Beach. A kid's bike got stolen, and myself and some others, we all pitched in some money to help get this kid a new bike because it just seemed like the right thing to do. But where this question and answer gets really interesting is that further down in the comments, a user named Bob replies and says, did it have training wheels? And the original poster, Catherine, responds and says, yes, black training wheels. So then Bob responds again and says, around 7 o'clock this evening, a lady who appeared intoxicated was trying to ride a green children's bike with training wheels past my house on the boulevard between Jarvis and Dufferin. She fell off right in front of me. She fell off right in front of me. I said that I think she needed a bigger bike. She said she found it and was taking it to her kid. She headed off down the sidewalk towards Gilmore. So that is incredible for a bunch of reasons. Okay, first off, I have my issues with the Fort Erie Questions and Answers Facebook group, namely the moderators, because I think sometimes they get a little trigger happy on disabling comments or taking down posts. I don't think they're always even-handed in their judgment, but I would be lying if I didn't say the Fort Erie Questions and Answers Facebook group might be the most robust Facebook group in Fort Erie, where it's like virtually everybody in this town with an internet connection is in this group. And it's amazing that a person can post, hey, my kid's bike got stolen. And another person in town just goes, hey, I saw that bike. I know where it went, or I have an idea at least of where it went. I think that's great. And I also love just the showcasing generosity here too, that we have people in our town that would say, hey, it's not my fault your kid's bike got taken, but I will help to make this situation right because I think it's the right thing to do. And as far as whoever this grown lady is who was trying to ride a kid's bike while intoxicated, lady, if you want to get intoxicated and ride kids' bikes around, that's your prerogative. I don't care. But to steal a kid's bike and say you're taking it home for your own kid, I'm glad you fell off that bike. I hope you hurt yourself. And I hope it was after 8 p.m. so you can't even go to Douglas Memorial to get seen for your injury. Anyway, this whole thing's got me riled up. I'm gonna end this feature here.
Community events coming up in Fort Erie.
Here's a look at some of the events happening around our town for the balance of the month. For starters, we've got movie night at the Ridgeway Legion. That's happening tomorrow, Wednesday, September 20th. Gets going at 6:30 p.m. The movie will be Iron Will, and hot dogs and popcorn will be available to purchase. Also happening Wednesday, September 20th at 7 p.m. is Paint Night at Southside's Bar and Grill. It's a family-friendly event, $25 for an adult, $15 for a child. All paint materials will be provided. Then on Friday, September 22nd at 7:30 p.m., you can catch both Golden Feather and Mark T Band at the Sanctuary Center for the Arts. Those are a tribute to the Jerry Garcia Band and the Grateful Dead, respectively. Saturday, September 23rd from 11 until 3, catch the 2023 Crystal Beach Car Rally that's happening along Erie Road. Barrel Down is performing at Brimstone Brewing Company also on Saturday, September 23rd. They're performing on the patio. Music starts at 7 p.m. and admission is free. At the other end of town, you can catch Mary Annie and the Suits performing live at Sessions on the River. Doors open for that event at 7 p.m. Monday, September 25th, Niagara Region Public Health will be offering free dental checkups and fluoride varnish for children. Walk-ins are welcome. This is happening at 10:30 a.m. at the Early On Center located at the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center. Then in partnership with Advancing Crystal Beach, there's a whole number of events also happening Monday, September 25th, being hosted by the Crystal Ridge Community Church at 12 p.m. We've got yoga, 4 p.m. is Dance Fit, 5 p.m. is something I'm going to mispronounce. I think it's Qigong. Am I saying that right? It says it's a system of coordinated body posture and movement, breathing, and meditation used for the purposes of health, spirituality, and martial arts training. That sounds an awful lot like yoga to me, but whatever. And then 6 p.m., again, Crystal Ridge Community Church, line dancing. Also, Monday, September 25th, Meridian Center for the Arts at Greater Fort Erie Secondary School. Monday Night at the Movies is back, brought to you by the Fort Erie Film Circuit, working with TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival. Tickets are available at the door, $10 each, or a book of 3 for $25. There's no mention, though, on Monday, September 25th, what the movie will be, so who knows? Go and find out, I guess. Tuesday, September 26th, you can catch Tuesday Night Darts at the Ridgeway Legion. That gets started at 7 p.m. Again, on Tuesday, September 26th, you can find a whole bunch of things happening at Crystal Ridge Community Church. 8:45 a.m. is Tai Chi. 9:45 a.m. is Zumba. 10:45 a.m. is ballet bar class. Then on Thursday, September 28th, Barnes Swallow's Book Club will be meeting. That's, of course, at Barnes Swallow Tea and Bookshop on Jarvis Street. The book club meets the last Thursday of every month, and that goes from 6 until 8 p.m. And then on Friday, September the 29th, catch the Fort Erie Rocks Community Benefit Concert. This is again happening at Meridian Center for the Arts within Greater Fort Erie Secondary School. Looks like there's going to be some Eagles covers going on from 7 until 9 p.m. And now it's time to jump back into my chat with Lisa Kelleher. Now, Lisa was eager to share with me her vision for a more sustainable global floral industry, which she told me might require a paradigm shift for consumers. Instead of importing flowers from South America and elsewhere in the world, she says, hey, why not popularize products that can be grown more locally, including edible bouquets? Have a listen.
The Fort Erie Podcast.
And so we could offer as a product, not just a beautiful flower bouquet, but a beautiful bouquet presented as a floral presentation that has all edible elements to it. It could have tomatoes on the vine cascading out, and it could be made up of the greenery background, could be all the edible herbs that you would put into a pasta sauce.
Now, as far as some of the, I hate to call them edible arrangements because that is a totally different connotation to it. But, some of these edible products you're talking about, some of the locally grown stuff, you carry some of these things now in your shop?
I do. I do offer, it's a line that I call Floral Organic.
Okay.
And so I would make arrangements with fruits and vegetables. I try to keep them whole so there's less spoilage involved. And I do like to provide the instructions for what the products could be used for, and if they're not used immediately, how they could be preserved.
Right. What's your website?
It's crescentgardensflorist.com.
Crescentgardensflorist.com. Okay, and I mean, I've been on your website. I mean, are there photos of some of these different types of arrangements?
So because of the seasonal availability of certain products involved in that line, it's more a custom design product that you would have to call me and discuss. I have used local growers and also local supermarkets as well. Like La Coco's is one of my favorite supermarkets to shop for in the winter when I do need produce to make the Floral Organics line. And so it's not a dead end in the winter, but it's limited availability. And so that's more of a custom order, and I need to talk to you directly to figure that one out.
If somebody wanted to talk to you directly, could they also connect with you on social media?
I do have some social media pages on Instagram and on Facebook.
Yeah, what are they? Do you want to plug your handles real quick so people know where to follow you online?
I believe, and that's terrible of me, but I believe it should just be Crescent Gardens, I think, on Instagram.
Okay.
And yeah, but they'll find my logo, the crescent moon with the blue flower on it. So
got it. You mentioned La Coco's a minute ago. I wanted to ask you, and maybe I'm stepping out of line asking this question. I don't want to put anybody in hot water here, but what is the difference between shopping at, say, a local florist with a local florist like yourself, or going to the floral section at Sobeys? And I'll give you the context for my question. Sometimes when I see, I don't know if you're part of some of these different Fort Erie Facebook groups, but I've seen people ask in, Fort Erie questions and answers, hey, where should I go to get flowers for such and such occasion? And I'm always in there commenting, go to Crescent Gardens Florist. But a lot of people seem to go buy flowers at Sobeys. What is the difference?
Okay, so meaning no disrespect to staff members of any large box chain like that or large grocery chain like that. There's a difference in the care of the flowers, because oftentimes those grocery stores they operate on a fundamentally on a financial level. Okay, so they have to meet their numbers, and it's not that a small business doesn't have to meet their numbers, but it's a difference of approach. And so supermarket chains don't necessarily have the staff that they need in order to care for the flowers properly. So the flowers might not be processed properly, and therefore they don't have as long of a shelf life. So they don't give them fresh cuts when they get them in. I'm not saying they do or they don't, but there's so many aspects to floral care, and the grocery chains may or may not have to skip a few steps because they just don't have the staff or the time. So you have to get the flower in, you have to process it, and you have to take all the greenery off and all the excess greenery off and make sure there's nothing under the water that's going to decay and contaminate the water with bacteria, and you have to give them fresh water with the correct ratio of the flower food, and you have to give them a fresh cut so they can drink it up, and they have to process in the open air for sometimes, and while their metabolism is high, and they can drink that antibacterial formula. And then you have to put them into stasis, into a cooler, so that their metabolism slows right down and they don't continue to age as quickly. And then they basically they stay in the cold chain right from the minute they're cut until the end user gets them, hopefully. And so in the grocery store, you might notice that the flowers are out on display. And while those units are sometimes refrigerated underneath, they're still not the same as being in a contained refrigerator where the humidity and temperature is controlled. So there's a lot of differences in flower care.
Obviously, I've shopped at Crescent Gardens Florist quite a number of times over the years. And one of the things I've always liked is that I can go in and this is something I don't think you could do with Sobeys, but I can say, hey, Lisa, this is the price range. This is what I want to spend. This is what the occasion is. And you can actually put something together for me, something custom. And I think I cut you off earlier. You were starting to say, if somebody wants something custom, don't reach out to you on Facebook, come in and see you at the store. So you are happy to have people come in to make custom requests.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's our favorite thing to do. We love to be able to put that personal touch in whatever we're doing. And in particular, one large aspect of the floral industry is the funeral industry, the sympathy side of things. And that's something that people that get into the industry don't expect. And it can be triggering for some people, and you have to learn. It takes a long time, but you have to learn how to be a good customer service agent when you are doing funeral consultations, and that's a big part of my business. But I find that aspect of the business, that part of the business, very satisfying, because I always try to find out something special about the person that I'm representing with those flowers, whether it's if they had a pink rose bush and that was his prized rose bush, but the family wants an all white casket spray, I'll tuck a pink rose into the back that you can't really see. Or if they were nature lovers and always out in the forest, then I would, incorporate bark into that arrangement for them. I mean, that's what I love the most, is being able to personalize things. So absolutely, I love it when people come in and talk to me.
Well, that's great. And you mentioned sympathy is obviously a big part of the business of what you're doing. I was trying to guess before we started talking about the busiest days of the year for you. I'm thinking probably Mother's Day and Valentine's Day. Are those the two biggest days of the year?
Yes, absolutely. Christmas is an extended period of about 3 weeks in December. Mother's Day is abbreviated to about 4 days in May, and then Valentine's Day is just one shocker of a day in February. Those are the three busy periods. Yeah.
I feel like it's like a lot of husbands coming in like 5 minutes before you close, just saying, "What do you have left?"
I mean, they're not as bad as all of that, but it's more like looking at their watch. Oh, it's Valentine's Day. I better go get flowers, because they didn't realize the other 364 days before that they could have called me and ordered them ahead of time.
Yeah, I mean, a bit of notice is nice, right? What are your hours at the store for somebody that wants to walk in and see you?
Yeah, so we're open 6 days a week. We're open Monday to Friday from 9 to 5:30 and Saturday from 9 to 5.
And of course, I know from experience, you can order right on the website, right?
Yes, you can order online, or you can call us on the phone or come in person.
And what areas do you...
Same-day deliveries. Okay. Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to ask you where you deliver to. I think you were going to answer my question anyway. Go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, we do same-day deliveries. So if you give us a call anytime before 2 o'clock in the afternoon or noon on Saturday, we can still get flowers out the same day for you. And we deliver all over Greater Fort Erie, including Black Creek, Netherby, Shirkston, and we even go all the way into Port Colborne.
Ranting and Raving on the Fort Erie podcast.
I'm going to make a bit of a bold claim for this edition of Ranting and Raving, and that is that nobody, and by which I mean almost nobody, listens to real estate podcasts because they are boring and they're pointless. What a way to start this segment. Now, you might already be thinking right off the bat, Brent, aren't you being kind of a hypocrite? Don't you talk about real estate on your podcast? And the answer is, well, yeah, of course I do. Yes. In some episodes, not in every episode, but in some episodes, I'll do a short real estate feature. I'll highlight one of my new listings, or I'll share some other info that I think might be helpful or useful or topical, info on short-term rentals or different first-time homebuyer incentives. But that's one part, like one piece of the Fort Erie podcast where I try to add some value. It isn't the entire show. So I'm not talking today about podcasts that simply mention real estate like this one. And I'm also not talking about real estate podcasts that are intended for real estate agents to listen to. Like if you say you're a little Tom Ferry wannabe and you sell, real estate coaching services and you have a real estate podcast that is intended for realtors to listen to, that's fine. Maybe some people listen to your show. I don't know. Whatever. What I am talking about, for the purposes of this segment, I am talking about podcasts about real estate hosted by realtors, often 2 or 3 realtors from the same team or the same brokerage. And they're creating a podcast that is not intended for other realtors, but intended instead for the end user to listen to, the homeowner, the buyer, the seller. These agents will sit around for an hour and talk about market trends and staging tips and interest rates and all that kind of thing, sort of in hopes that they can show how knowledgeable they are. And in turn, listeners will want to do business with them. Now, look, I've listened to a bunch of these real estate podcasts. They're rampant in the GTA. There's some based out of Hamilton. There's a few here in Niagara. I'm not trying to say the content is bad. The content is fine in most cases. It may be thoughtful and thought-provoking and well-researched. But my thought is this: unless the listener you're trying to attract is like a big-time real estate investor who's eating, sleeping, breathing real estate all the time, like I just don't think the average person, the average podcast listener, is thinking about real estate all that often. Not until they're actually ready to go buy or sell. Like thinking just, here in Niagara region last year in 2022, there was something like 3,700 plus homes sold, give or take. So for every sale, there's a seller and a buyer. So like 7,500 people across our region of almost 500,000 bought or sold last year. It's like 1.5% of our local population. That's not a huge audience. And I can guarantee you that those folks who did buy and sell last year, I can guarantee you that almost none of them took advice from a real estate podcast. And here's how I know, by the way. And I know what I'm about to share is a bit anecdotal, but just stay with me. I had a beer with a friend of mine a few months ago. He's a fellow realtor, and he used to co-host a Niagara-based real estate podcast with another fairly notable agent. And they did a good job, by the way, with this podcast. This is going back a few years. They not only did the audio piece, like I do, but they had video too. They had a very professional studio setup, what some people would call a vodcast, like a video podcast. They knocked out a whole bunch of episodes. They promoted the heck out of them all over social media. So, just to recap, 2 hosts, great personalities, did a regular show, high quality content, and, trying to reach a broad audience, speaking to Niagara real estate issues that affect, say 500,000 people almost across our region. So as I was having a beer with my friend, I asked him, when you guys were doing that show back in the day, how many downloads or listeners would a typical episode get, if you don't mind me asking? And he said, not many. So I go, well, okay, man, how many is not many? Can you quantify that for me? And he said, 10. Yeah, you heard that right. 10. He said they would be lucky to get 10 downloads or 10 listeners on a new episode. Nobody listened to their real estate show. So they stopped doing it quite naturally because it wasn't bringing them any business. All of this reminds me of the old adage that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I know it's cliche, but look, as I said, the Fort Erie podcast, this is not a real estate podcast. It is a community-focused podcast because I've always been a community-first kind of realtor. And guess what? Tracking the stats, the Fort Erie podcast is my 3rd best source of business, if you can believe it. People actually listen to this show, a lot more than 10 per episode, by the way, and then reach out to me and decide to buy or sell with me, to do business with me. How cool is that? I get to do something fun like this podcast, and I get rewarded for it too. So if you're a realtor and you're thinking, hey, podcasting, that sounds cool, that's something I'd like to try, well, look, I encourage you to do it, man. Go for it. Start your own podcast. Matter of fact, you could start a podcast just like this one. You could call it the Even Better Fort Erie Podcast if you want to. It's totally up to you. Do whatever you want, but just please don't create another real estate podcast that nobody's going to listen to because we already have enough of those.
You're listening to the Fort Erie Podcast.
Earlier in today's episode, I played 3 Byrd Box messages. 3 different men, 3 different traffic-related concerns, and all 3 of these callers seemed to be hoping that I could do something to solve their problems. And look, I can't. I don't wield that kind of power, guys. I don't have that sort of influence. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a real estate agent, and I do this podcast. And this show was never intended to start creating, changes in our town. This show is about having a bit of fun, poking fun at things, putting a spotlight on what's great in our community. And sure, look, we can complain about stuff on this show. As a matter of fact, I'm the guy who always says, call the Byrd Box 24 hours a day, squawk about anything you want. I literally invite you to call in complaints if that's what you want to do. And I'm happy to play them for listeners, but I just don't want to give the impression to, especially to new listeners, that by calling the Byrd Box, you're going to bring about change in our town, because that really isn't what the Byrd Box is intended for. But at the same time, I also, I didn't want to disappoint these callers. So I'll share what I did. Some easy stuff, some easy things anybody could do. Easy as 1, 2, 3. Actually, maybe that's what I'll title this segment. Easy as
1, 2, 3.
If you, by the way, if you don't know what that song is from, you clearly don't have a toddler at home. But anyway, yeah, easy as 1, 2, 3. Let's start with our first caller.
1.
So our first caller wants to see speed bumps on Burley Road, the stretch between Dominion and Thunder Bay, to curb speeding. So what I did is I sent an email to Joan Christensen, the town councillor for Ward 4, to ask if she might propose speed bumps for that stretch of road to town council. She responded to me, and I'm going to get that AI robot thingy again to read part of the email she sent back to me. Here it is.
Hello, Brent. In April 2023, Council approved report as 09-2023, the traffic calming policy. The report identifies priority roads for traffic calming measures. I should note that speed bumps are no longer considered effective traffic calming measures by professionals. Alternatives include the movable speed measuring devices that both register and educate people on their driving speed, physical interventions such as roundabouts or curb pushouts, etc. Residents who believe that they need traffic calming measures on specific streets can complete a traffic calming assessment form. They can obtain the form by emailing through the contact feature on the town website or by calling 905-871-1600 extension 2041. I hope this provides you with additional information.
Yeah, I think that response is great. And caller, there's your answer. The town doesn't do speed bumps. Sorry, but they are open to other traffic calming measures. If you want that stretch of Burley Road to be considered for some of these traffic calming measures, you just have to fill out the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Study application form. I've got it pulled up on the town's website right in front of me. Easy peasy. So let's move on. The second caller.
2.
Yeah, the second caller wants helmet use to be mandated for electric scooters when they're in live lanes of traffic. So in response to this one, I sent an email to Tom Encina, our regional counselor, to see if that's something the region might entertain. Tom replied really quickly. Here's a robot reading what he had to say.
Hi, Brent. I will look into this and get back to you. I will also ask the councillors on the police board to address this. Thanks for this. Once I hear back, I will call the Byrd Box. Respectfully, Tom.
That's amazing. What a great response from our regional counselor. I love Thomas Prom. Not only says, hey, I'm going to look into this, but he also promises to respond by leaving a message on the Byrd Box. I think that's fantastic. I actually don't think I've had a politician at any level agree to call the Byrd Box. So there we go. That's something new for this show. And our third caller.
3.
Our third caller was concerned about speeding on Garrison Road, especially in the morning. So I emailed Niagara Regional Police, the traffic complaint department, to see if, it might be possible for them to do something like deploy more resources to Highway 3 in the mornings to hopefully curb some of the speeding, especially near the school zones. I have not got a response at the time I'm recording this, but hey, again, maybe this caller number 3, he should do the same thing as caller number 1, fill out the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Study application form. Just a thought. Anyway, I hope this helps. I did what I could do at this end. And you, dear listener, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, please consider sharing it with a friend. Make sure to follow Crescent Gardens Florist on social media, by the way. If you're in downtown Ridgeway, maybe just pop in and say hello to Lisa. Coming up on next week's brand new episode, I'm going to actually have 2 guests. Now, regular listeners, you'll know I do a recurring feature on the Fort Erie podcast called This Month in Fort Erie History. Well, next week, local historian Bob Fretz is going to be joining me. He'll be joining me to do that segment for me, basically. He'll be sharing some interesting things that have happened here in our town in September's past. And my other guest will be Christine Whelan. She's a freelance writer and perhaps best known around our town for her work with the Fort Erie Observer. Now, originally I was going to save our discussion for an episode coming up in October, but you may have heard last week that Metroland, that's a division of Torstar, they're discontinuing our local print newspaper here in Fort Erie, the Fort Erie Post. And that's the same with other smaller communities, smaller markets right across the province. So as it stands at the time you're listening to this, the Observer is the only remaining print publication in our town. And if I'm being really honest, I'm not super happy about that. Between news links being banned on social media and print publications being discontinued left, right, and center, it's getting harder and harder, I think, for local residents to get their hands on local news, especially seniors. And I think it's more important now than ever to throw support behind the Fort Erie Observer. And that's why I want to get Christine in front of you guys right away next week, dear listeners. So you're not going to want to miss next week's brand new episode, 2 great guests. And just as a quick reminder, if you aren't already subscribed, be sure to subscribe to the Fort Erie podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And remember, if you're a grown adult, whether you're intoxicated or not, please don't steal kids' bikes. Okay? It's gross. Just don't do it. All right? Bye.
1, 2.
You've been listening to the Fort Erie Podcast with your host, Brent Jones. Never miss an episode. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or visit theforteriepodcast.com.